All right, well, welcome everyone. Thanks for braving the August day in New Orleans to come join us here in Maine in June. But and just so you know, there was water absolutely streaming down out of those lights onto the front desk about an hour ago, which was not from the storm. Apparently, someone upstairs left a sink on and flooded their apartment. So I imagine they're in much worse shape. So anyway. Oh, Dean took care of it. All right. Yeah, we're all good. All right, so welcome, thank you for coming. We obviously have with us tonight Tom Paiement, and we're very excited about that. He's here to talk about his current exhibition, Poetry Perversions. It's obviously a very thought-provoking title, and so it'll be very interesting to hear Tom's thoughts about that. What I really like about every new show of Tom's is that they're all different from the last one. And what's particularly interesting about this one, I think, is that there's so much different kind of work. I mean, you've got still lifes, landscapes, figurative paintings, but they're all tied together by this wonderful theme, and it all really works well together. And so it's really interesting to see. And even within any painting, you have painting, drawing, collage, barbed wire, and so it's just really this interesting mix of media, subject matter, all drawn together with this very interesting theme. So just so everybody knows, we are live streaming on Facebook, so if you're watching on Facebook and you have a question, you can just type it into the comment section, and I will read it to Tom here in the gallery. And so everybody here knows, we record all of our talks, and so you can either go on Facebook where it's automatically recorded the live stream, or we get cleaned up versions from Reggie and post them on YouTube. So if you ever miss a talk or you want to watch any of Tom's past talks after this talk, you can get on YouTube, just put in Greenhut Galleries and you can find it. So now just a little bit about Tom before I turn it over to him. So Tom Paiement received his BS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Maine. After working in the aerospace industry for years, he decided to explore the creative process, offering him an aesthetic outlet that was missing from his mathematical and scientific work. And so again, going back to all of the different subject matter and media, Tom's also got an engineering and science background, in addition to being an artist. He earned his MFA in printmaking at the University of Iowa under the tutelage of Mauricio Lasansky. And Tom then taught at Hamline University in St. Paul prior to returning to Maine permanently. And now here he is, and I'll turn it over to you, Tom. Thank you.
Well, the first thing I should probably say is the variety of work that I gave the gallery this time was pretty extensive. And the way they put it together was absolutely beautiful. I feel that truly the way they hung this show was a work of art in itself. And I think I give credit to mostly Kelly and Roy. Roy probably getting the benefit of the doubt on this one. So that having been said, I will mention the idea of my background being in the field of science, being an engineer. I think people have a misconception about art and science not being related, where the truth of the matter is art and science are absolutely interconnected. And people usually think in terms of Van Gogh as being the emotional artist who just emoted with his paintbrush. But if you read Van Gogh's letters to his brother Theo, you will see how unbelievably brilliant and analytical Van Gogh was. So that is a misconception I would like to address. And that's pretty much throughout history. All the greats really had an analytical ability to see what their work was doing. This work was pretty interesting for me because it overlapped my leaving a studio in Bath that I had been working in for 20 years, and I left that studio in 2020. And when I got back to our studio in Woolwich, to our rural home, the transition from being in Bath for those 20 years and then being home where I was amidst the serenity of nature, really, made me realize what was around me. And that's why these paintings all reflect just drawing from the porch area and seeing what resulted from that. In conjunction with that time period, 2020, I was also aware of, obviously, the craziness that was taking place politically in our country. And I had worked politically previously. I've been with the Greenhut Gallery now for 24 years. Peggy Golden saw my first work at the CMCA up in Rockport. And from that period on, I've been having shows every 2 years. So the variety of what I have shown here is quite extensive. But politically, I've always been very astute with how wacky things can be. And the name of the show of this one, Poetry and Perversions, I feel was really relevant to the time. Poetry, in the broader sense, being beauty in relation to not only literature, but film, painting, music, is all around us. And perversion, as we all know, is also all around us because of the foolishness that is, as we speak today, taking place. And I think 2 years ago, Bob Keyes and Wes LaFountain did a curated show at the Cove Street Gallery on sports. And they asked me to be part of that, and I said, sure, if I could do wrestling. And I wanted to do wrestling because I wanted to convey the hostility taking place within this country at the time between, let's call it, the Trumpers and the no-Trumpers. And it is quite hostile, and I think that ultimately does not bode well for the time, really. Not that we haven't had time periods where we have had trouble socially, politically. 1968, the Democratic Convention, the whole Vietnam era, World War II, prior to that, World War I. It's not new, but this seems a little different, and I'll tell you, I think the difference actually is where we have gone electronically. This is an unprecedented era in the fact that we have entered into an age where everybody on the planet can be connected instantaneously with data that they are receiving, and they can get their own conclusions based on that. And so this really is different in that sense, in that there's no homogeneity related to the information we're getting. Everybody is getting their own information based on where they are going. And as a consequence of that, I think the age is very confusing. And so some of this, like the wrestlers, reflect that aspect to it. The boy in front of the horses is one of my favorites in the show. That reflects the tragedy, really, of the hundreds of thousands of children, as we speak, who are just destitute for a better life. And it's almost unreachable for them. And it is just sort of typical of many things today. The flower themes come about because when I get back to the studio in Woolwich, after having been in Bath so many years, I've always drawn what's around me. Marit, my wife, who's an artist, was drawing flowers, so I started drawing flowers that led into viewing outside, into the rural aspect of landscapes. This piece here, the sleeping child, actually, is the oddball of the group. And one of the puzzles that I knew Roy and Kelly were going to have in particular was how they were going to place this image. And how they did it was just absolutely terrific. But this represents the perverse nature of man, who we can put people on the moon, and simultaneously, during a war, a man can take a machete and kill a sleeping child as he sleeps. And that sort of represents that aspect of the perversity of what I was trying to indicate through the show. This is obvious, just craziness between men fighting. I guess as far as these are related to looking outside the studio. These two, same thing, represents views outside the studio window. This one here, in particular, was some are more difficult than others. This one was a real bear to complete. And I guess as far as the nature of the show, Poetry versus Perversions, that's what I was trying to convey in that 2-year period where I had my last show. Are there any comments, questions at this point? Peggy?
Tom, I'm interested why you chose to leave the color from that painting.
Oh, yeah, I was asked that before, too. Peggy was asking about pretty much why this was left.
Devoid of color.
Yeah. sometimes a drawing just works as a drawing, and being a draftsman, after I put in that little bit of red, I realized that that was enough to take care of what that drawing was about.
Question. So this painting here looks like you use newsprint. You use newsprint on the painting, on this painting here?
No, but this painting, well, the ones I use,
The one in the front window, Tom.
say again,
The one in the front window has the newsprint, right?
is also ink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's got the collage to it.
Yeah, it's as a draftsman, I'm seduced, you might say, by line. And as my background in art is an MFA from Iowa, where it was in printmaking, etching and lithography. And so the power of a black line is always sort of there. And I use that often, especially the figures of the wrestlers. That was really crucial, trying to get a line aspect that wasn't necessarily related to what the figure really is, but conveyed what the figure could be.
It seems like you use the newsprint to make textures on the hills.
Yeah, the newsprint is just a collage, use of collage, which throughout my art career, I've always used torn papers as sort of finding shapes, really. Form, for me, is the crucial aspect. And when I say form, I sort of relate to two artists. Milton Avery has a really unique form, even though it's representational work. Nevertheless, his form is really peculiar. And Giorgio Morandi, the Italian artist who pretty much for 40 years did a series of bottles that he did over and over and over and over in a very minimal palette. Use of color was very minimal. Nevertheless, what he did with that work was just truly phenomenal. So form is always pretty imperative or tricky. Roy?
Going back to the printmaking, is there anything in the show that is actually printed?
No, but the piece in the show of the baby was a woodcut I did of my son when he was just born, a few months old. And I took that woodcut and I enlarged it and I painted all the woodcut-like marks with a paintbrush. So that's why it has that sort of feel.
A lot of them do. I mean, a lot of the wrestlers.
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
trees.
Yeah, this could be similar. That could be a woodcut. Any of the, actually some of these too.
Can you talk about, is this a self-portrait here?
Yeah.
What does it represent?
What's it represent?
Well, for self-portrait.
You see.
Well, it's got some blood going on, it's got a lot of, it seems like it's got stuff happening beyond the self-portrait.
Well, I hope so, sure. Yeah, and this, you know, I don't know how many self-portraits I've done, but I like this one because I like the fact that the Aloha shirt captures probably one of my innermost natures, surf bum. And I love the fact that I incorporated this painting of mine, which represents one of my abstract pieces of a few years back, and it's not overdone in the facial area. So, yeah, I've always really enjoyed that piece.
I mean, it's interesting that you include a self-portrait in this show about this subject matter and this kind of range of subject matter, because of course it's the hand of the artist, but you also put your image of yourself in this too, and I think that's cool, and I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, well, there's no explaining anything, really. I mean, truth be told, but I agree. But one of the reasons I wanted to include the self-portrait is the Poetry Perversion title. I wanted the portrait, which I feel is poetry. And as I said before, poetry I'm using in a broad sense, not in the literature sense of poetry, but anything beautiful today being poetry. Kindness to animals can be poetic in how wonderful it is, in contrast to the perversity of what people are doing too is just so strange that I like the contrast. So yeah.
And you're the poet as the title.
Yeah, right.
So,
Yeah.
agreed.
Do you feel emotional when you're doing these paintings? Do you feel anger or sorrow or when you're going at it?
Well, I must say there's probably more anxiety when I'm trying to resolve a piece than a joy or just, although having said that, the power of this pursuit, as we all know, is the engagement at the moment. The engagement becomes a meditation. And even though you have anxious moments where you've done something and it completely destroys what you did previously that you were responding to, nevertheless, that is part of the engagement. So the emotions I feel when I'm painting, I don't know how Roy, Dean, Holden would feel, but whatever that involvement is really what it's about. And I can't stress enough, to do really good work is oftentimes like pulling teeth, because it is really frustrating. Dean?
I'm glad you touched on that subject because I'm really interested. If you take a look at all the pieces in here, you'll see mixed media on panel. And I remember having a discussion with you. You were talking about moments of anxiety or moments of being not so sure, and you will incorporate an entirely different medium into the painting to sort of break up whatever you were feeling before. I was wondering if you could speak on that sort of process for you as an artist to create something different after you are maybe stuck, putting something new on the panel to get you to a different point.
Well, we have talked about this. Mark and I have talked about this. The most enlightening, you might say, moment when I am trying to finish a painting is when you can't get it, it's unresolved, and you say, screw it. And you take a big brush and you go splish, splash. And by doing splish, splash, you have loosened things up. You've become free again. And in this painting here, I always really enjoyed. This part never I couldn't figure out. This was working from here to here. But I realized I had to destroy the piece, but I was trying to keep this. So when I really took a big brush to this, all of a sudden I was working very freely, had a big, huge piece of pastel, did these shapes, and then the coup de grace on this one was finding this green mass. When I found that, bam, the whole thing came together, and it was like a voila. And those are the moments really that keep me painting, because those moments are really very, very high moments when you've found it. Boy, yeah, that's the hook for me.
I wanted to ask about your drawing practice and whether how you leave paper behind, because you draw beautifully, and I can imagine that you were that way as a printmaker, and jumping to painting on panel is just feels like a miracle. And I don't know. I just wonder if you go back and forth a lot. And, does it help you, like this drawing? Does that help you get that center part of that painting in your mind? I don't know.
Not necessarily, because this is all drawing in here.
Yeah.
But I must say drawing really is, the drawn line on a white piece of paper is really, really my love.
Yeah.
And the truth is, when I see my background being in engineering, and having been raised in Brunswick with parents who had only a high school education, my exposure to the arts was really nil. And my first job happened to be in California. And when I got out there and walked into a friend's brother's studio and saw what he was doing, it was my real first exposure to what you might call fine art.
Yeah.
And what he was working on was big, huge pieces of plywood, 8 feet by maybe 6 feet. And he was taking pieces of tissue paper with Elmer's glue and just pasting them on, the plywood. And he was just putting pieces here and there. But the shapes and the colors just absolutely floored me, to the point where when I saw what he was doing, I said, I don't know what he's doing, but that's what I want to do. And so when I started taking night classes and doing paintings at home, abstract pieces, cutouts, I realized that I couldn't draw because I tried drawing and I had no talent for drawing. And so I just started drawing all the time, going to figure classes, life drawing classes, and really got proficient with the ability to draw. And when I found teaching, I did conclude that I seemed to be able to teach the students how to draw, but I couldn't teach them how to compose a page. Composing the page is almost intuitive. I think you're either born with that ability or maybe not. but that's my own viewpoint in that regard. But drawing for sure is, every piece in here really is about drawing in essence.
And are these lines India ink?
Yeah.
And are they masked? They're so crisp. And are they
No,
just
I
with
use,
a pen?
my wife does, my wife has 2 paintings in the other room. She uses these tiny, tiny brushes that she buys dozens at a time. And when she is no longer able to use them, she gives them to me. And but it has a tiny, tiny ferrule to it, or a bristle. And that's what I use. I just mix liquid and black oil paint, and I just put it on a palette and do it very delicately. I used to ink them with a rapidograph pen,
Yeah.
but I realized that it's quicker and I have more flexibility using a paintbrush. So I started doing that, and I like the effect a little bit better.
Do you do any printmaking these days?
Gee, we haven't printed in years, but I do miss etching. I really love the copper plate as far as the type of mark that you can get with a copper plate is like no mark you can get drawing.
Yeah.
Are you a printmaker?
Yeah, sort of, in a manner of speaking. But I'm with you. I'm sort of a paper addict. That's why that was my question. I find it really hard to move away from
Paper?
paper and color and pen and line on paper. And I'm just sort of, I don't know whenever I took away that painting, but that painting just, I came in here and I just was like, wow! It just, I don't know what it is. It's just a combination of those things, but it was that boldness of the color on the panel and also all the line, which I think adds a lot.
So what do you use when you use color on paper?
Ink, watercolor, and inks mostly, and color pencil, which I like a lot. Soft color pencils.
I would think
Anyway,
watercolor is that can be very tricky. I would think in some ways an oil pastel would give you maybe a little more flexibility.
yeah, it's so much looser.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, and also bold color, really bold color,
Yeah.
which I also like. But anyway, I appreciate this show for the way you change, well, across the arc of the times I've seen your shows here, the ability to change just really is inspiring. And it just keeps moving, you keep looking, and I'm a huge fan of the way you approach that.
Well, you think that really goes back to my response to this guy in California. Once I got interested in art in my mid-20s and started studying it, I realized the breadth of what it was about. I mean, I think that's probably why I don't have a style as such, because there's just so many things to explore in so many different directions. I've never recovered from my absolute love of Caravaggio and de Kooning and all the ones who were just so far removed from the other guys. And I'm still sort of searching and trying to be interested in what's around the bend.
Yeah, well, it shows, and it's inspiring, I think.
Oh, well, thank you.
Just keep at it.
I needed that.
Have you got a
It's overwhelming, the amount of work that you, how often do you take out the big brush and revert to that?
You mean destroy it?
Yeah.
Oh, more often than you might think, and it is really, it is a very low moment when that happens, because you realize after all that work, and sometimes it's literally months of looking at something and trying to figure it out, but historically, it's not a new idea. I mean, because I'm constantly reading about other artists, and the best ones do that constantly. De Kooning is one I keep going back to. Willem de Kooning, there's a story where he did a painting called Excavation, which is about 8 feet by 8 feet. And there was a critic who befriended William de Kooning named Harold Rosenberg. And he really was a brilliant writer. And there's a story where he went into de Kooning's studio and saw this painting he was working on. And he said, "My God, Bill, that is just fantastic." And Bill said, yeah, whatever. And so he goes back apparently a week or so later. The painting is completely rearranged, but equally as beautiful. And he tells de Kooning, "Geez, you have to stop. This is a beautiful painting." And this went on for 2 or 3, 4 times until you can look up the painting Excavation. It's hanging in MoMA in New York City. And it is just unbelievable in its complexity. And so he was constantly looking for something that only he really could respond to, because nobody else knew what he was looking for, because everybody else saw it as really finished. So yeah, I don't think that's unusual, but it is really hard on the psyche.
It has to be overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about that, that's a perfect example.
Well, that's one of the tricky ones too. Boy, I busted my fanny on that one over and over and over and over. Yeah, I just couldn't. And it's interesting because Mart works upstairs, I work downstairs. And so naturally, when we're stuck, we go back and forth about, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And when I put that black mass of green in the bottom, I had Mart come down, and Mart's reaction was, "Oh, geez, that's just terrible," type thing. But, I wasn't so sure I agreed with her. But, yeah, that piece was really hard. That peculiar shape off to the middle section, that yellow, weird shape, that was another piece that Mart wasn't particularly fond of, but I was overriding Mart on that score too. But yeah, that was really a very hard one to complete.
How often do you fight them till the end and keep reworking them, or some just don't make it?
No, some go into the burn pile. A lot of them. Yeah.
What, do you have a percentage? Can you guess? Somebody asked me that.
20%.
20%?
That's,
pretty good.
was that does that sound right, Mark? I mean, what percentage do you destroy your work?
Not enough, I can tell you. It just piled up. I'm just seeing it in my mind's eye. I'm thinking, that might be really good to just.
Well,
take it out to the
that's the other element to this. I mean, how many barns do we have to put our work in, before our kid says, "Enough, Dad"?
So Tom, we had the earlier wrestler paintings in that sports show at Cove Street,
Yeah.
and those seem much more controlled violence.
Really?
Sports, I thought.
Oh, you thought they were more violent?
No, less violent. Those seem more controlled. Like the violence in those seem more controlled.
Oh.
And these seem more violent, more life and death stakes. Like those didn't seem like a life and death stakes wrestling match, whereas these do. And so I was wondering if you see these as a continuation, if like they're all in the same series, or if these are something completely different than those prior ones.
Well, those two pieces at Cove, it's too bad we don't have pictures because one of the two, I would say, is equally as violent. But the one in the window is probably the most outrageously really violent. And this one here is pretty violent. I guess all three of these could be considered pretty violent, but I see this one is pretty controlled. But
Maybe it's the blood.
what saves this one?
Other than the punch to the head.
So Dean's gonna grab the one from the window if you wanna talk about that.
Oh, no, no, no. Oh,
He's got
oh,
it over there.
oh. Oh, okay, okay. All right, all right.
Can you put it on the other side? Sure.
Or right in the middle so we can see.
Maybe on the other side if you want.
So we can see it.
You wanna?
Can you see this, please?
So you can lean against
Dean,
How about under the?
put it right here.
Oh, yeah, under the shot.
This was, yeah, this was done over a long, long time, working it, tearing pieces of paper off, reworking it, going with a big brush, trying to organize shapes. But that one is the most perverse, in my mind, of the show. Because that really gets into the nitty-gritty of men being brutal to man.
Well, and this one too, correct me if I'm wrong, because this one, from the prior show, you had
A cove.
the talking, shoot, what was it? No, well, something, it was the shouting figures, like remember you had the
Oh,
media
yeah.
figures like
Yeah,
shouting.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, right.
Talking in tongues. Talking in tongues there.
Right.
This one sort of reminds me of that, but again, more violent.
It is part of, see, let me show you something. See, this isn't a new idea for me. I did what I call an entropy grouping. This was, I think, done in 2007. I spent 2 years on these paintings. These paintings are 6 feet by 7 feet, 3 of them. And these came about from when my son turned 18, eligible for the draft. The idea in my mind of my son going to war and being killed was so tragic for me to think about. And at the time, there was another uprising in the Middle East where there was a picture of soldiers on the streets dead and a mother holding a child dead. And so this wasn't really a new idea. I had done these 3 pieces a number of years ago. In fact, one of the curators at the Portland Museum of Art thought that these were as strong a contemporary work that she'd seen in Maine for years. And Cove Street has them at the moment. They're still just absolutely terrific. If you haven't seen these pieces, they really are a knockout. Yeah.
What are you working on next? What's your, where are
Well,
you?
you know, that's a good question. I really don't know. I have ideas, but which I was quite excited about. And the initial start of this idea is going right off a cliff, so I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing next, really. But I do want it to be more, let's say, flamboyant. Taking a big gallon of red paint and going. I say that kiddingly, but see, what happened in my mind was when Jackson Pollock did his, he ended something for a lot of artists as far as freedom, because no one can be as free as that anymore without saying, oh, he's doing a Jackson Pollock. So, and if you look, as we do daily, of what is being done artistically, there is so much work out there, so much imagery, so much diversity of imagery, and beautiful stuff being done. So to find a voice today, it's really difficult. So yeah, I don't know.
Does AI art concern you at all?
No. I mean, I know. I probably, I mean, I say that flippantly, but it is, again, it's right smack dab in our face, and what that will do, it will broaden the scope of what we're going to be seeing for imagery, because who knows where that's going to go.
Do you think a younger artist would have more fear of AI than someone, at your age who's done so much of it?
No, I
Maybe they don't know.
wherever we go, we are going there. And AI, I do find the age that we have experienced is unbelievably interesting. There's no precedent for it, really. And I find that, I feel lucky to be alive in this day and age. I wish
And you have done what you've done.
I wish I could see, even 50 years hence, to see what it's going to be like, because boy, we really are moving in zillion different directions simultaneously. Thank you all for coming. It was really, thank you.